Let's talk about Steve Biko, shall we?
We believe that in our country there shall be no minority, there shall be no majority, there shall just be people. And those people will have the same status before the law, and they will have the same political rights before the law.
It is the 1960s in apartheid South Africa, and segregationist racist laws are in full swing. The ANC and PAC are banned, and in exile was popular figures like Nelson Mandela, Ahmed Kathrada, and Walter Sisulu are imprisoned following the Rivonia trial. This is the fallout of the Sharpeville massacre, and organized resistance to apartheid has been completely broken.
Except for a single man and a single movement, Stephen Bantu Biko.
Is it Stephen or Stephen? Anyway, it's Bruh Steve.
No doubt in my mind that people, and I know people in terms of my own background where I stay, are not necessarily revengeful, are they sadistic in outlook? Now, the black man has got no ill intentions for the white man. The black man is only incensed at the white man to the extent that he wants to entrench himself in a position of power to exploit the black man. But beyond that, nothing more. And we don't need any artificial majorities, any artificial laws to entrench ourselves in power, because we believe once we come into power, our sheer numbers will maintain us there. So we do not have the same fear that the minority white government has been having all along.
Steve Biko was born on the 18th of December 1946 in Takastad near King Williamstown, which is now known as Qonce. Apartheid having officially been instated in 1948, Biko was cursed to live his entire life under apartheid, a system of racial segregation and discrimination against non-white groups in South Africa. Steve was considered relatively smart. He jumped around schools a lot, starting primary school at Charles Morgan Higher Primary School, before moving to Forbeskrans, then later Lovedale, where his brother Khaya was learning. Khaya was a member of POCO, the armed wing of PACE, and this is where Biko's political activism began. Biko was arrested alongside his brother for his brother being a member of POCO, whereby they were attacked by apartheid officers and then later released without being charged for any crime. Khaya would cite this as the event that convinced Biko to become a political activist, stating that the apartheid government had managed to convince Biko to become a freedom fighter in mere days when he had failed for years. Biko was subsequently expelled from Lovedale for the incidents. This was a result of political tensions, as former President Thabo Mbeki had been expelled a few years prior for similar political issues. He then moved to St. Francis to complete his matric before going to Durban Medical School in 1966 at the University of Natal's non-European section, which is the current UKZN, the University of KwaZulu-Natal. He quickly became involved with student politics, becoming a member of the SRC in his first year and the National Union of South African Students, NUSAS. Okay. He attended his first NUSAS conference, but even before the conference, debate had been heavy around the role of NUSAS and black students who felt that they should not be part of NUSAS as it was heavily white dominated in a majority black country. These tensions would come together at the NUSAS conference of July 1967 held at Rhodes University. On the way there, Steve and other Wentworth students debated the issue of black affiliation with NUSAS and resolved to pull out of NUSAS if the organizers adhered to apartheid-era legislation by housing black students separately. The organizers did in fact do this, complying with the Separate Amenities Act, which mandated that black students and white students could not share the same amenities, same facilities. They made black students stay in a church in Grahamstown and brought them to the conference every day by cars, displaying how little valued black students were by the conference. When the conference opened the next day, Steve decided to prove a point by delivering his original report in his Xhosa about the alienation of black students in NUSAS. The president of the WITS SRC proposed a motion to condemn the University Council, which was passed. Then Steve proposed that the conference be suspended, citing that the use of separate amenities was disrespectful to black students. It was rejected. Steve and his fellow black students decided to walk out. Leaving the conference, Steve traveled the country to caucus for a black-only student movement, and during this time he met Barney Pichana, a law student from Fort Hare. Barney was opposed to a black student-only movement, but after Steve convinced him, he became Steve's most important lieutenant. At a United Christian Movement conference, Steve and his black comrades faced a similar situation to NUSA's 1967. There was a law called the Group Areas Act, which mandated that black people were not allowed to be in white areas for more than 72 hours. The conference was held in a white area, and black members had to stay at a nearby township and travel every day to attend the conference. This irritated Biko, who saw it as hypocritical. When the conference ended, Biko, Pichana and others met at Biko's home in Ginsberg and discussed the foundation of a black-only students movement. Biko was tasked with mobilizing black students from all campuses for this cause. They later met at Fort Hare with black student Christian bodies, having been tasked to establish a UCM branch in Fort Hare. Steve was asked to be the main speaker after the original Basil Moore had not been allowed to speak. They did establish a UCM branch, then students resolved to form a black-only student movement. They founded the South African Students Organization, SASO. Then in December 1968 at Marion Hill, SASO was officially founded. Its first congress was then held in Turfloop in July 1969, where they spelled out the reasons for the organization, citing that it was not a rival to NUSAS and it continued to accept its role as the leading national body for students. SASO merely rejected the dichotomy between the principle and practice of some members of NUSAS, stating that it was purely hypocritical. They were against the domination of white students in a country that was majorly black, and affirmed that SASO would not be an affiliate of NUSAS. In his personal life, Biko started dating famous anti-apartheid activist Mamphele Ramphele, and however she was promised to another man, and in December 1969 she got married. Biko did not attend the NUSAS conference at UCT that year as he was too busy with SASO. But those who did walked out of the conference, mostly black students, as the conference still favored white students. And around this time, Biko started dating Paula Enzo, who was also a white supporter of SASO. He attended the NUSAS conference in 1970 at the University of Natal as an observer delegate of SASO. Paul Pretoria submitted a motion to NUSAS to recognize SASO as the organization best able to represent the views and needs of black students. He called for more cooperation and integration. The motion caused an uproar amongst racist white students who rejected the motion outright without even giving it a vote. Then Paula Enzo did something crazy. She stood up from her seat and went to Biko and sat on his lap, announcing their interracial relationship to the world. Now, in any normal society, this is just two people who are doing dating stuff. But in 1960 South Africa, this was a crime. A crime that could be called for death. Trevor Noah is famous for his parents not being allowed to walk together on the same street. And so the conference ended on this high. The polar fling ended and Biko finally settled down, married Nontsikelelo Mashabalala in 1970 and having their first son in 1971, named Kosinathi. Barney Pichana was then elected president of SASO and Steve became the chair of SASO Publications, which is when he started writing under the title Our Rights Was Alike. The need to appease NUSAS had gone away and they refused to recognize NUSAS as the national student body. They also began community upliftment programs, such as assisting squatters in Phoenix near Durban, operating a clinic near Wentworth, and launching literacy, health, and agricultural programs around the country. They cited the need to not only improve the material conditions among black communities, but to instill a level of self-empowerment and determination.
Don't you think that the black man, in fact, is perfectly well able?
The black man is well able and the white man knows it. I mean, the irony of that kind of situation is that when the white government negotiates so-called independence for the so-called Transkei, they don't speak in terms of a qualified franchise. In the Transkei, every Transkeian votes. you see, and you get white nationalist politicians arguing that this is a system which is going to work for the Transkei. But somehow when it comes to the broader country, the blacks may not vote because they don't understand the sophisticated, economic factors out here. They understand nothing. So they need to operate at a different sort of level. Now this is all nonsense. It is meant to entrench the white man in the position in which he finds himself today. We will do away with it altogether. There will be a completely non-racial franchise, and black and white will vote as individuals in our society.
At its second General Council, they rejected the Christianity of the white electorate, citing that they upheld structures of oppression. They also discussed launching other movements, such as political and trade unions. They also started other community upliftment programs in Turfloop and Pretoria, and around this time, an event that would take place that would project SASO to the national stage. A man by the name of Umkhuputse Abraham Tiro was expelled giving a speech criticizing Bantu education and racist practices in society in general. This was probably the foundation of a major event that would shake up the world in about, 4 years. But for now, students protested through solidarity strike, boycotting classes. Many were expelled, and SASO was suspended and only allowed to operate off campus. This made the apartheid government very angry, and they reacted likewise. At its third council, President Themba Sono asked for better relations with whites and Bantustans. He does realize what he's asking for, because SASO and Steve Biko and his entire movement had been asking for more cooperation with NUSAS for years, and they had not accepted it. But now he was asking them to cooperate with whites and Bantustans. This was not really a good idea, and they voted to expel him. They voted to expel their president. SASO also debated joining the armed struggle around this time. The MK party and military movements that were in exile at the time. Student politics were limited, broadly to students that mainly dealt with students' issues. SASO leaders wanted to broaden their impact in the community, and this resulted in the Black People's Convention. Steve wanted the convention to be a mirror of Black people's law. To him, Black people included colored and Indian communities. So he submitted that these communities must be consulted and that on what they want the organization to be. This happened, and the Black People's Convention was lost in Hammarstroud in 1972, proposing to unite all blacks into a single political movement seeking their liberation. They started community programs in King Williamstown, Winterveld, and others. The Black People's Convention soon became a presence in the country, being seen as the answer to the lack of resistance against apartheid following the bans of the ANC and PSC. And soon the apartheid government saw it as a threat to us and began to act. In March 1973, the state began banning Black People's Convention leaders, starting with Drake Coker and Bokwe Marina, who engaged in programs. Biko and Pichana were banned in the same month, and this was after the death of Mthunzi Shezi. Abraham Tiro followed, dying by a parcel bomb in exile. They also arrested Mosibundi Mangena, who was sentenced to 5 years for convincing policemen to join the armed struggle. The first generation of SASO leaders had been neutralized, but the second generation was about to cause more chaos. The newly elected Secretary General Muntu Mnyeza decided to organize rallies to celebrate the independence of Mozambique and the Frelimo transitional government in Durban and Turfloop. The government decided to ban these, but Muntu proceeded with the rallies regardless, resulting in students clashing with police. The state responded violently by raiding 200 Black People's Convention activists and putting 13 on trial, which ended up being 9 after charges for 4 were dropped. They probably sold out. Steve became a witness for the defense, being tasked with speaking up for the Black consciousness movement without making points that could help the state attribute terrorism and insurrection to the accused. The accused were all found guilty and sentenced to between 5 and 6 years at Robben Island, which could have been more without Biko's testimony. In 1975, Steve's sister died and he was detained for 137 days without being charged. His ban was then tightened in 1976, making him no longer able to be a director of the Black People's Convention. June 16 also happened that year, whereby thousands of students across the country protested being taught in Afrikaans. Biko's message had reached children. Remember that guy Abraham Tiro? Well, this is the event that he started. By the way, he was the teacher of one of the leaders of this protest, so he was teaching history to a guy named, what was his name?
Black People's Convention activists were subjected to crackdowns, being arrested, raided, and killed. Biko was again detained for 101 days without getting charged.
This is all fascinating. As an outsider, visitor, I can only say that my feeling is that this is bound to be a very long and probably a very bloody road.
There is that possibility. But as I said earlier on, it will be dictated, purely by the response of the Nationalist Party, which has led to these many laws, designed to keep them there.
Biko was released and began meeting with band leaders of both the ANC and PAC, including the legendary Robert Sobukwe. He became the honorary president of the Black People's Convention in 1977 and was detained again for meetings as the state was desperate to prevent relations between the Black People's Convention and the banned revolutionary movements.
Steve was then released again, and then he asked a friend, Peter Jones, a Black People's Convention activist, to accompany him to Cape Town to meet a man by the name of Nelson Alexander. After arriving, Alexander refused to meet with the two, citing that if they met, it was a danger for all three of them being captured by the government whilst they were banned. So Steve and Peter decided to drive back to King Williamstown that night. They stopped at the roadblock and were identified. The police decided to separate them into different stations because of their different skin color or something. This was the last time Peter would see Steve. Steve was detained for 20 days, where he was stripped and tortured before being transferred to Port Elizabeth, where he was manhandled for disobeying orders and later developed a brain hemorrhage around the 7th of September. Doctors found nothing wrong, but the specialists recommended that he be sent to hospital immediately. They did not listen. On the 11th of September, Biko was moved on a 700-kilometer trip to Pretoria on the back of a van, naked and floating on the mud, and unable to speak. A surgeon tended to him in Pretoria, but it was too late. On the night of the 12th of September 1977, Stephen Bantu Biko died.
Post-mortem report was done on Steve Biko's body a couple of days after he died. Minister of Justice Jimmy Kruger stated that he died via hunger strike. However, this was the 20th person who had died at a prison in the last year or so, I think. There was international outcry for Biko's death, and this made the UN continue talking about sanctions against the South African government for the apartheid government system. Biko's funeral was one of the most heavily attended funerals in the apartheid era, and the reaction was wild. People protested, people fought back against the regime. AZAPO was formed a year later as a successor to the Black Consciousness movement, and Biko's name still lives on today. There has been an inquiry into his death that has begun last year or this year, if I'm not mistaken, late last year or early this year. And that's the video. I believe there's a lot more that can be talked about by Steve Biko, but he is one of the most important figures in the late liberation struggle. He's probably one of the most important figures in African history, if not world history. Bye.
Will the vast number of blacks, after all their experiences, be able to live a life without giving vent to feelings of revenge, of
yes, we believe it is the duty of the vanguard political movement which brings about change to educate people's outlooks. I mean, in the same way that blacks have never lived in a socialist economic system. They've got to learn to live in one. In the same way that they've always lived in a racially divided society, they've got to learn to live in a non-racial society. They've got many things to learn, and all these must be brought to them and explained to the people by the vanguard movement, which is leading the revolution.